secure digital life in South Dakota at Mount Rushmore, as you can see in the background. We're going to talk about encryption, symmetric encryption, asymmetric encryption, all kinds of crypto analysis kinds of stuff. So be sure and hang around for secure digital life in South Dakota at the Wild West Hackett Fest.
This is a Security Weekly production.
Welcome to Secure Digital Life. And you type in AAA porn or whatever it is you're typing in. I'm sorry. I was at a PG show.
And I'm really excited to be here.
I'm glad you're here because somebody needs to know what's going on.
That's right.
Okay, so now
somebody has to drink this.
I think it's another day. It's another episode.
Yeah, he's looking at the wrong camera.
Oh, you put my camera over here. Cut. Basically, forget you ever saw that. I think actually forgetting you ever saw that would really be a good idea at this point. It's South Dakota, from the sunny shores of South Dakota, where the air temperature is like what, Russ? You looked.
It is a balmy.
Oh yeah.
39.
30.
No, 46 now.
46 now. So practically bikini weather.
Yeah.
Get his bikini out later.
Oh, thanks.
We're here at the Wild West Hackett Fest at the Lodge in South Dakota, where they would not let us into the casino with our camera. I went in there and asked, but I just kept getting the runaround from different pit bosses and floor managers going, no, ask him, no, ask him, no, ask her over there, and maybe they'll talk to you. But we're here. Wild West Hackett Fest starts tonight and goes through the weekend. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be a whole pile of people rolling in here later. We saw a horse trailer pull up a few minutes ago, so I guess they were bringing the horses.
Yeah, there's a petting zoo, I guess.
I heard either that or some kind of...
Or maybe it's a heavy petting zoo, I don't know.
A heavy petting zoo, a ritualistic animal slaughter. I don't know what they're doing, but something like that. Yeah. But Providence HackCon was on Saturday, and that went really well, and everybody had a good time.
They did.
Congressman Langevin was there with all his crew, and we had Jeff Mann was there. And in fact, Jeff Mann impressed me so much with his presentation on crypto that I got inspired to talk about crypto on this show, because I really want to talk about WEP and WPA and all those hacks and things that were going on, because I know you've been seeing a lot of stuff about that. So I thought we should talk about crypto a little bit and do an intro to it, and then maybe next show we can talk about what WPA and all those kind of things are and get into some of those cracks.
Cool.
Yeah. So we're sitting here on the veranda in balmy South Dakota shores, and I want to talk a little bit about Cyphers first, because encryption starts with Cyphers. So if you deal with Cyphers at all, and this is always one of those sexy topics that people love to hear about in like the training classes that I used to teach, and everybody's always wanting to get around to, like how do you do these things and whatever. And a lot of Cyphers are really just basic things. And the traditional Cyphers came out of they always talk about Caesar Cyphers. And so Caesar Cyphers really just were letter substitution ciphers that everybody used to do with your Captain Midnight magic decoder ring. So you take a D and make that a Z, and you have some kind of pattern to that. And then in the traditional Caesar cipher was just shifting the letters 3. And at a time when 80% of the human race was illiterate, that was pretty effective. I mean, just the fact that you wrote it down, kept most people from knowing what it was. It was like magic scribbles on a parchment. You're like, burn him! And it's like, yes, burn him! It's a witch! But today, we see all sorts of things, and Jeff Mann was talking about Vigneri ciphers, and in fact, I learned that Jeff had invented the Whizzy wheel, which is a little metal wheel that Special Forces used to use to decrypt orders, I guess. I don't know exactly how all that stuff came in, but here comes Zeke in his giant truck.
And that was not a cipher.
Yeah, but he's probably coming to pick up stuff from the horse trailer, but. Jeff was talking about Vigneri ciphers, and Vigneri ciphers are a more complex type of cipher where you had multiple alphabets that were being used based on like a sort of rotating grid scale. So you can go all the way from here to there to World War II to Enigma machines and things that use rotors and things like that to generate. Do you have any other ciphers that you know?
Well, I mean, just the ones that were like in pop culture, like Dan Brown's. What was the name of that movie there?
Oh, the Codex.
Yeah, with the Codex. Yeah.
So
now they're selling them on Touch of Modern. They become $22,000 for a crypto Codex thing.
Okay. Spend your
I'm all
money
set.
wisely and get a crypto codex while the getting's good, because at 22,000 they're going to be selling like hotcakes, or whatever they sell here.
Yeah.
Fry bread. I ate fry bread yesterday, which is really good. That's one of my favorite things.
Walleye, which I never had.
Oh yeah. Well, Russ had walleye.
No, I didn't, but I want to.
Oh, he caught it.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's trying to get it cured. Okay. That's what happens. A couple of kinds of encryption to bring up straight up for you then. Our picture seems to have frozen, so I'm wondering if we've dropped.
No, we'll just keep going.
Okay. So symmetric encryption is one of the older and first things that I wanted to bring up. And in some ways, symmetric encryption can be one of the most secure types of encryption there is. It can also be one of the least secure, depending on how it's implemented. And I think that the key to all this is talking about how it's implemented. So you can always come up with a cipher that can beat the world around you. So whether it's because people are illiterate, or it's because you use neutrino generation in the bottom of a mine shaft, like we saw yesterday. And I mean, basically, if you have good implementation, you can create security that works. And symmetric encryption means that both parties have the key. So it's on either end. And in some ways that means it's a very secure scenario, because you don't exchange the keys, or you band that they use. That means that I give you the key. So I give Russ the secret key, and he takes off across the Wild West. And now whenever he receives an encrypted message, unless someone brute force breaks that message, and now we're back to implementation, it's going to be very difficult for anyone to acquire the key unless they force Russ to give it to them, or they have some way to get it. So memorized keys, memorized key strings. One of the oldest symmetric approaches was to use books. So you saw people saying each of us has a copy of the King James Bible. And if you know on a rotating basis where in the King James Bible we start the crypto every day, when he gets a message and says, okay, I know that started on 1 Samuel verse 9, chapter 21. I don't know what that Bible verse is. It probably says something really horrific, like beat them soundly around the head and shoulders with large sticks until they surrender. The holy hand grenade of Antioch. But now, symmetric encryption led you to what's called a one-time pad. And one-time pads are really considered sort of the ultimate type of encryption. And people were generating one-time pads for a long time. And because it was used only once and it was discarded, that rolling one-time pad was used in such a way that no one could really figure out what the key was. They didn't have enough time. And that led us to talk about disposable keys and being able to just change keys every day. Because if I give Russ a secret key and send him off to the Wild West, and we keep using that key over and over and over again, eventually someone's going to break it because they get enough instances of that message that they can break it. For instance, the Enigma. So Enigma was a World War II machine everybody's very familiar with. They've heard about it. It used rotors. It was very sophisticated. It was supposed to protect German, messages from being cracked, because it was very difficult. The Japanese had these things as well. There was one called Purple or something that the Japanese had. And, of course, all the Allied sides had trying to use crypto. And the way they finally broke this encryption was literally by using repetitive things that occurred. So the phrase Heil Hitler was used in every order that the Germans issued. And once somebody realized that, and this was covered in the movie The Imagination Game, which was about Turing, who was one of the groups of people that was breaking. He gets a lot of credit for it. The Poles had people working on it, and they broke Enigma as well. So there was a lot of stuff like that going on. But those kind of symmetric encryption ciphers were what were primarily used back in say World War II. Do you have any?
No. What was another one? A Code Talker? Was that a movie that was based on?
Well, Code Talkers is about Navajo. The Allies used speakers of the Navajo language because the Navajo language wasn't written down and very few people knew it. Yeah. And so cracking it was a kind of pseudo encryption, but because no one could speak the language, it was very effective. And the Code Talkers just and they would read Navajo, and because there was no written, it was very difficult, as you might guess, for somebody to learn Navajo because it's not written down, and they probably didn't have a lot of access to Navajo people, and there weren't that many people who did it. But so all this led us to asymmetric encryption, and asymmetric encryption is not, by sort of its nature, as secure as symmetric encryption. and there are other limitations of it as well. But it's what is used everywhere, and there's nothing wrong with it. Don't get me wrong; I'm not saying that at all. But asymmetric encryption is a situation where we have a public key that's used to encrypt, and a private key that decrypts. So these are called trapdoor algorithms. So when they first started developing this stuff, essentially what was happening was, I can use a public key that I give to everyone. So I can just take my public key and hand it out to anyone and everyone. And theoretically, anyway, only that private key can decrypt that trapdoor algorithm. So the string that comes out of public key encryption is encryptable by my private key, which I should give to no one. So once again, it's just as secure as symmetric encryption, or more so. The problems emerge in the implementation. And so usually when you hear people say that crypto is getting compromised, it's often been based on the implementation rather than the crypto itself, because these trapdoor algorithms are pretty robust. And so if I'm using some of the ones that you see out there in the wild, every time you use a website, it has HTTPS on it, you're using asymmetric encryption. That's used for every bit of that. Again, if you compromise the private key, so if your private key gets stolen, now the crypto is still perfectly fine, and there's nothing wrong with the crypto. It's just somebody can use your key to break that. So if they're able to snag your key off your machine somehow, you give your key up. However it gets lost, basically happen in that is that those kind of crypto algorithms are going to be broken, but they're not necessarily truly broken. So I guess the question becomes, what does it mean to break crypto? Have you ever tried to break crypto?
I have not. Just in class we talked about PKE and asymmetric and symmetric, but never tried to break it myself.
Well, I mean, typically the way that they break crypto was just using math. I mean, they were literally just doing numerical analysis of what was out there. So if you read about what Turing and these guys were doing, they were trying to come up with more effective mathematical algorithms, but the computers that they were building were really just doing these computations for them quicker, so that people could try to analyze where do commonalities occur. And so if you're trying to break German encryption, you're looking for tendencies in the German language, which might give you an edge on essentially guessing what the crypto is. Because if you can guess a key, you could put that key in and boom, all of a sudden you see it start to break. It's like you break the Captain Midnight decoder ring crypto that people were doing years and years ago. If you could guess the letter E, being the most common letter in the English language, then you could substitute an E every time you saw it. If you've ever played those word scramble type games that used to be in the newspaper when I was a kid, where you're literally just trying to guess what the crypto is, that was essentially what people were doing to try to break crypto. Ideally, to me, if you looked at a long pattern of crypto, what you would see is a uniform distribution of letters. So this would be sort of the ultimate goal, is that every letter or symbol in the crypto occurs an equal number of times. So that means it's just a nice flat pattern. So now there's it would be difficult to achieve that, but you could. Yeah. And the closer you get to that kind of a crypto, the more difficult it's going to be for someone to guess it from the frequency distribution of the symbols. Add symbol sets to it. So now don't just use 26 alphabet numbers. Add symbols, add emojis, and all of a sudden you have all these endless substitutions. And the more that you do that and the more you churn it, the smoother and more consistent that crypto pattern gets, and the less clues someone has as to how crypto might actually work if you tried to put it in practice in the wild.
And Jeff was talking about at the Providence HackCon how they were using multiple alphabets to normalize the distribution of occurrences of letters. So what did he say? A 5 alphabet encryption was yielded just enough of normalization so you couldn't see that E was occurring or frequency of the letter T, but it got super complex and
they add noise to. I mean, if you're really doing cryptos for enciphering messages or whatever, you really start using fillers. You start using all kinds of buffering and things like that can be added to the crypto, so that what happens next is that really difficult or to look at the cryptos, but computers can jump in there and then try every possible substitution. So this gets back to what is called brute forcing. So the term brute forcing, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, brute force methods of attack are simply running you try every combination of everything. Like a dictionary attack would be a brute force type, where people just try and try and try a preset list of 100,000 combinations to get into.
Well, when you do password cracking, which is another kind of crypto breaking, you often start with dictionary attacks, because anything you can do to shift, kind of the casino, it's kind of like anything you can do to shift the odds in your favor means that you have a better chance of breaking this. So if you know a lot of information, like when we used to do forensics password cracking, we would always create a dictionary list that ran first. So that means if you knew another password the person used. So this is why people are always trying to steal passwords. If I know your password is LL Cool Daddy, I put that at the top of my password list because you used that password on your email account, and now maybe that's the one you used on your server account. If I know that your birth date and your daughter's birth date and your home address and your social security number and your dog's name, all those things I can add. Plus, I can just take the Oxford Unabridged English Dictionary and dump it in there just in case you were stupid enough to use a dictionary word as a password. But today's cracking algorithm are smart enough even to switch over and use LEET. So they, substituting letters for numbers, substituting symbols for letters. All these kind of tricks that you see people doing to create stronger passwords are the same kind of problems that we have in cryptography. And when we do cryptography cracking, we run into that very same thing. So anything you could insert into your cracking of this crypto that you knew about the person, that you knew they might be using, like they have a favorite phrase. But the more you create length, that's why passphrases came about and all that kind of stuff. But so back to, you probably use crypto every day, whether you're using a VPN like we're using on our phones here at the casino because they have an unsecured Wi-Fi. So we were making sure our VPNs were enabled on our systems at the hotel. You should use that anyway, even if they have secured Wi-Fi, especially if you're at a hacking conference where people may be breaking that. And you use this when you use HTTPS. So on a website that you go to where you enter a password, typically what a web page is designed around now is you have HTTP components of the web page and you have HTTPS components of the web page. The HTTPS is asymmetric encryption. That means that web server issues you a public key when you connect to it, and that public key is used to then encrypt the information that's being sent back in response to the request where you hit enter and you want to send your login and your password or your driver's license number or whatever it is you're entering, and that is encrypted using the asymmetric encryption, and then it's decrypted using the web server's private key. Now, obviously, somebody could compromise the web server and get the private key. Obviously, there are mechanisms now we've seen where people have started using exploits in certain types of encryption to extract the keys. And so I'm going to kind of lead us up to the end of that, which is talking about how these keys get generated, and lead us into the next show, which is talking about some of these types of encryption. So web servers generate keys with entropy. And if you've seen this, have you ever worried about entropy?
Well, the entropy is defined in science, the amount of disorder in a system.
Exactly.
So, I'm all about entropy, maximizing entropy. And so is the universe.
Russ is entropy personified.
So is the universe.
Well, there was a problem with the way that entropy was generated for computers. A lot of which are kind of random. They're not really random, but they're kind of random. Keys being touched, all sorts of things, and then that worked fine. Today, they need so many keys that we're running out of entropy, and which sounds kind of crazy, but you're running out of entropy locally, not in the universe. If we run out of entropy in the universe, I'm not sure what would happen. It's like call Stephen Hawking, maybe he can explain it, but it would be really, really bad. But locally, entropy is a problem because as we use VMs more, VMs don't have those mouse moves, or they have them, but they don't detect them in the same way. And we actually saw people setting up lava lamps and pointing webcams at them. So they would set up all these arrays of lava lamps, and the webcam then was generating entropy. And that's kind of problematic because setting up 48 lava lamps or something uses power and heat and all kinds of stuff. There are companies now that are making quantum boards. If you've watched Security Weekly, we've had a couple of people on there that are local in Rhode Island who have built quantum light entropy boards that you can use to generate entropy for all your VMs across your network and your servers and all that kind of stuff. But all that leads us finally to the idea of encryption that's used to protect your Wi-Fi traffic, which is kind of where this all came from. I mean, there's encryption and all this stuff is a huge field of study. You can spend years on it. You can get PhDs in it. You can do all kinds of things. You can take crypto classes. We have a couple of crypto classes in our program, and people like to take them. They're fun to talk about. But the big thing that's been lately has been the problems with encryption on Wi-Fi. So when you put that password in on Wi-Fi, what you're essentially doing is creating encryption between you and the Wi-Fi node. That means it's somebody who snorts your traffic. So literally, we're sitting here using Wi-Fi to stream this to you, and which is not entirely true, but we could be. But if that was being sent over radio frequency into the casino, which there's a node sitting in there, that means anybody out here in this parking lot, anybody that's in the building, anybody that was nearby could actually be grabbing that traffic. They could grab this signal. As we showed you last week, they could Wireshark those packets. They could very likely reconstruct this Skype conversation out of the traffic. And what that would do to us is nothing at all, unless we lose the Skype passwords and things. But those are also encrypted again by HTTPS inside, I guess it's HTTPS inside Skype. So when you send that connection, that's encrypted one more time. So they could grab the traffic, but that's going to be encrypted like we showed you some of that. But if they were able to break that through some kind of an exploit, they might even be able to get through the Wi-Fi encryption. So your HTTPS is still protecting you a little bit, but it means that they could crack that. And so one of the big news items lately was about one of the forms of Wi-Fi encryption, which is called WPA2, being cracked. And it really cracked. It was cracked an exploit in the actual software that does it, rather than the encryption itself breaking. So there are issues with that. And the way that they prevent this from breaking now is, of course, using massively long numbers. So guessing what these strings are is really hard. But so next time what we will do on the show is we want to talk about some of these different things, how you can set those things up. And we'll talk some about Crack, K-R-I-C-K, which was this WPA2 exploit that ended up resulting in people being compromised. For now, Russ and I are going to go back inside where it's warmer, because I think my hands are turning blue.
And your nose too.
And my nose is definitely turning red. It's not because I was drinking all night. No, that didn't happen.
No, it didn't. I
swear. And that horse trailer I was never in the horse trailer, I swear. But because it's about 40 degrees out here and the wind is blowing really strong, we are going to go back inside, and we will leave you with that. But if you are at the Wild West Hacking Fest, come by our table there, come by us and have some fun. They got lots of training starting in the morning. Registrations this evening at, I think starting at 4, they're going to have some registration, I think, and then that's for the training registration. And the conference starts on Friday. So you have 2 days. They're going to have a Halloween party where if you're going to, I think the best John Strand costume was going to win a prize or something like that.
It's Friday night.
So we're going to the leather store this afternoon to get leather outfits that have cutouts in strategically placed locations, which I will not say here, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. He says that now. But in the meantime, we're going to head back over to the horse trailer and just see what's happening there. I hope you get to come to Wild West Hacking Fest, and you're going to be here in South Dakota, because it's going to be 18 degrees high on Thursday with a snowstorm, so it ought to be quite interesting. Russ, if we can stand it. I don't know if anybody's going to go out in the 40 mile an hour winds with the minus 50 wind chill to fly the drone down the valley in the snow. But
I'll do it.
It'll never come back, and Russ is going to lose his expensive drone. Thanks for watching SDL from South Dakota. We'll see you back in the studio next week. Bye.